as you are on the spiritual path, I will say failure doesn't exist, but it does. Why I'm using both of them here? Because you see, there is so many people who call themselves, say that they are on the spiritual path. In reality, they are there just to, as a trend, or as a, because it is custom to be spiritual nowadays. Very often people, you see that often they say, oh yeah, I'm doing a little bit of yoga, I'm on the spiritual path. I would say this is completely total failure in life, because that deepness of spirituality itself is not by turning your feet upon your head that will bring realization to you. So that is not spirituality. When we are talking about spirituality, we are talking about something which is completely deep in itself, which is rooted deeply. And how many people really want to hear about such spirituality? The world is not ready for that. They're scared about that. When we talk about spirituality, people say, yes, spirituality, I touch a little bit like that, weekend spirituality, which is on the weekend I do spiritual things, do a little bit of yoga, a little bit of meditation, and I feel good about it. But who are you fooling here? You're fooling about only yourself. You're not fooling anybody. And that is not spirituality. That is things that make you feel good about it, and which is okay. It's not bad to feel good, because especially in this time right now, it's always good to do some things. But when we talk about spirituality, when you're saying in your question about failure in spirituality there is no failure. Because spirituality gives you an understanding that everything, every step of your life is important. It is a development to get to know truly, firstly, who you are and where are you leading. What is the aim of your life itself? Spirituality is about that. So when you go into that deepness of spirituality, then you can say, yes, there's no failure. But as long as you just touch and go, of course you will fail many times. But if you are fully rooted upon your spiritual journey, upon your spiritual path itself, there is no failure. And for that, Bhagavan Krishna is clear about it. In chapter 6, verse 24 and 25, he said clearly, what is that, what we need, He said, abandoning all desire which is born out of sankalpa, restraining the senses, by the mind, and let not all which is flowing around disturb. Little by little, the mind, which is controlled, which is calm by the intellect, centered itself, where the focus must be upon the self, and think of nothing. So when we analyze this, Bhagavan said clearly what is the spiritual life itself. First on that verse he said, abandoning all desire which is born out of sankalpa. So here, what he said, when you are on the spiritual path, your life itself must transform, must change. You must understand, that this life has been given to you. It is not yours. And everything else what you have desire about, what emerge firstly, like where does that come from? So abandoning the desire means unwanted, agitated, breeding desires, which awake itself, and disturb desires, which will not lead you anywhere. Of course, in the mind, you think that, yes, it is great, I'm on the spiritual path, I have so many things. No, here, Bhagavan clearly said, if you are on this path, you see, you have to change, you have to transform. And people nowadays don't want that. You see, they're scared of spirituality. Said, what will I lose? What will I say, if I go on this path, I'm losing something. No, you have never come with anything here. What would you lose? All you took it from here. So how can you lose something which you didn't bring anything with you? So that's why Bhagavan is clear in that stance. So he clearly said, abandoning all unwanted desires. You see, in your mind you fashion so many things, which is very disturbing. And when these desires is not fulfilled, you are never satisfied, you are never happy. You may be on the spiritual path or you may not be on the spiritual path. You will never be happy. Here I'm talking about true happiness, which is deep rooted within yourself. Here Bhagavan said, through the mind controlling the senses. The mind, here when we look at that, we can see that the senses are completely different from the mind. So who is stronger here? The mind is stronger or the senses are stronger? Clever. The senses are more stronger than the mind. The mind doesn't have any power upon the senses. Even scientifically, it's proven, that the mind, the senses are governed by unwanted desires. So they get agitated by these unwanted desires. So the mind, as much as you say, yes, I want to control it, would the mind be able to control it? No, it will never be in control. That's why Bhagavan said, first, through the mind, learn to control these senses. But first, above all, that unwanted desire. Firstly, when we are sitting in the spiritual path, we have to get rid of all unwanted things that we don't need, because they are not useful for your spiritual growth. And don't be shy, don't be scared or anything, because he will fill you with more things that you are not even aware of. So, looking at that, he said, controlling of the mind which is like, the senses, which is like the horses, which is running wild by themselves. So you have to restrain these senses. That's why when you see Krishna on the battlefield, holding the 5 horses, by the rein, this symbolizes that we have to hold strongly, control the senses, don't let it run loose, onto the outside reality. So how, when you're restraining your desire, firstly, you're getting rid of all the unwanted desire, you're restraining the senses. The next verse that he said, little by little, the mind will weaken itself. So when the mind weakens itself, so you're not letting the mind, the senses, the mind dance with the tune of the senses, you are restraining it. Little by little, it starts to weaken itself. When the mind weakens itself, what takes over is the intellect. So the discriminative intelligence which is inside of you start to take control, which means the mind shifts itself from being loose running into the world, it becomes positivity running inwardly. So when you start running inward, but where to focus? You must have a goal to focus. Here Bhagavan said that you should focus upon something which is eternal. The mind can't just run and focus on things, but it must restrain itself and focus upon something which is eternal. So it said, focus, restrain the mind, and by focusing upon the self, meditate upon that eternal self, that part of divinity which is inside of you. See Srimad Narayana inside of your self. So, of course, people will say, where is the self? I've never seen the self, But when the mind itself automatically is restrained through your meditation, through your sadhana, all this, automatically that feeling, that, when that calmness, that when you are in this state of serenity, that mind, when it alter itself from a running mind into the unwanted desires, you see, that mind itself turn inwardly. So that mind become divinized. So when that mind become divinized, the mind journey and the self reveal itself to you. Here Bhagavan very clearly said, while you are focusing upon the self, think of nothing. So how would that do? He clearly said at the end, think of nothing. So but how can we tell somebody not to think of nothing? So in the state of Satchidananda, in the state of beatitude, in the state of complete serenity, one is fully into that divine space. Automatically the mind will never be able to think of things. Empty mind completely. Mindless state. Now everybody wants to become breathless state, No, first become mindless state. Once you become mindless state, you can become breathless state afterwards. This is the next step. So into that state, then you can say, yes, I am on the spiritual path. Because from that point of view, you start to feel that universal love for everything around you. And that's what Bhagwan is, This is what, when you are in that state, there is no mistake. You may do something which doesn't, turn the way everybody expects it to be, or it can be a mistake in the eyes of everybody. But from your side, because you are already into that phase of complete surrender, so there is no karma which is linked together with you. So into that state, when you have reached that peak of spirituality, then there is no mistake in it. But as long as you still restrain your mind into this outside reality, you still think of I, mine, me, of course, then you will make a lot of state, whether you're on the spiritual path or not.